Is Starlink the best internet for life on the road? Is it practical, and how much power does it use? Let's find out.
Today I'm going to talk about how Starlink has been working for us, how fast it is, and how reliable the connection is. I'm also going to talk about power consumption, costs, in what situations Starlink might be suitable for you, and a few van life specific considerations as well. For the first part of our trip around Australia, we just used our mobile phones for internet. We had increased our plans along the way to get a bit more data with that. This was generally okay, but there was 3 situations where this wasn't really practical. Firstly, if you want connectivity everywhere, a lot of rural Australia doesn't have that greater coverage for the mobile network. We even have a mobile booster, but to be honest, it's not that effective. Secondly, if you want reliable internet speeds, often when we did have mobile reception in some of those rural locations, the level of service was pretty low and the internet connection was also quite slow and often just unusable. And thirdly, if you have high data needs, if you're watching a lot of videos or uploading a lot of videos, then you can chew through your data pretty quickly. We ended up going for Starlink because it advertises 100% coverage across Australia, which we wanted for peace of mind in case of an emergency. It also offers high speeds and unlimited data. We found that we'd been going through all the data on our phone plans, even with those plans at an increased level. For us, this is particularly because we're uploading a lot of videos to YouTube, so that was chewing through a fair bit of data.
If you haven't seen the hardware, it includes this dish, this cable, and this router.
Let's talk quickly about setup. So initially it was pretty easy to set up. It was just a matter of logging in via the app, plugging the dish into the router and turning it on and just going through the setup process in the app. The router creates a Wi-Fi network just like you'd have in your home. And so when it's on, your phone or your laptop or whatever just automatically connects to that. Each time we set up camp and we want to use it, we just put the dish out either on the ground or on the roof of the van, switch it on, and within a few minutes it connects. We've actually had a couple of instances where it's been slow to connect. So that's typically been when the sky hasn't been entirely clear. So whether we've had some trees or something blocking it, the dish does like to point south. So if you've got a tree or something like that, it can make it slower to connect. We have also just found sometimes it has been slow to connect, and we've found that rebooting it via the app tends to fix it and then it'll connect the next time. It doesn't always happen, but yeah, it's happened a few times. There are some different hardware options as well, so you can get a dish that can be permanently mounted to the roof of a vehicle, so you don't have to set it up each time you set up camp and you can use it all the time. There's also some different hardware for the foot itself, so you can have it on your roof rack or different places like that. We've just got the standard foot, so we have to put it on the ground or sit it on the roof. Starlink runs on 240 volt power, I guess what you typically call mains power. So for us, we have to turn our inverter on and run it when we want to use that. So there's an additional power demand there. I have seen though that there's some modifications you can do. I'm not sure whether that's through a kit, but you can run it on 12 volts. We've found that the router and dish seems to be drawing around about 60 watts. And then having the inverter on draws another 30 to 35 watts on top of that. In terms of draw on our 12 volt system, having Starlink on is about 4 to 5 amps of draw, but then realistically it's more like 6 to 7 when you have the inverter on. This is definitely something you should consider if you have a smaller system or you get limited sun or you're planning out your solar system now. Just account for that if you want to run Starlink and if you want to run it for long periods as well. We've got a pretty decent solar system with 400 amps of lithium batteries, 600 watts of solar, so for us running it hasn't been a massive problem. I've been doing regular speed tests since we've had Starlink, and I've seen speeds of between 75 and 220 megabits a second, but on average it's about 150 megabits a second that we've seen. And overall I'm really impressed with the speeds and the latency that we get as well. It's really good. For upload speeds, we've seen between 7 and 17 megabits a second with an average of 12 megabits a second. This is pretty good. Definitely nowhere near as fast as the download speed, but it's pretty good for what it is. Most people are going to have absolutely no issues with either the upload or the download. For us, we do upload videos to YouTube, so we do notice that slightly slower upload speed. If you've got a 4G or 5G connection, a really good connection, it is going to upload a lot faster than that. But for us, it's just a matter of planning around, knowing how long something's going to take and just planning it in advance. In terms of the reliability of the connection, we've found it to be pretty good and we haven't had any major problems with connectivity dropping out. The connection does rely on linking to a satellite, and the way Starlink works is actually an array of satellites that are circulating around Earth rather than a stationary one. So if you do have an obstruction like a tree between the dish and the satellite, it is going to give you intermittent connectivity issues and it's going to drop out regularly. We have had a couple of instances where we've had campsites where we've had unavoidable trees and we've set it up and the connection has dropped in and out. And if you go in the app, it will usually tell you as well how often that connection is going to drop. So it'll say expect to drop every 16 minutes or something like that. There is also a feature in there that shows you obstructions. So once Starlink's been set up and operating for a while, it actually maps out the sky. You can also do this with your phone when you're setting it up. There's a camera function in the app that lets you work out where obstructions are, and that'll help you set up the dish and determine what obstructions are in the way. Both of our parents actually have or have had Starlink, and they both live on rural properties, so in a fixed location, and both of them have had connectivity issues due to trees. So for Brooke's dad, he lives deep in a gully and there's a lot of trees and things like that, and he basically found it didn't really work reliably for him just because of where he was located. And my mum's got trees around the house as well, so she does get regular dropouts, which can be frustrating. I haven't been home since she's had that, and she's had it for a few months now, so I haven't been home to see if we can try and tweak the location and get it to work a bit better. But she uses that for her internet and her phone as well, because of where she is, there's not really any other good options for internet. And so it can be frustrating if I'm trying to talk to her, the connection drops out on her end and we'll have to redial in. I guess that's just something to be aware of depending on where you're located and where you're planning to use it. We have recently been in some very remote locations in Australia, including crossing the Nullarbor. And for most of that, we had very little or no mobile phone reception. But each night when we set up camp, we'd also set up Starlink and it worked great. We were able to use our phones like normal, including just making phone calls through Wi-Fi calling. All right, let's talk about cost. So there's two components to Starlink. First, there's the initial hardware cost, and this is going to vary because there seems to be deals and things going on all the time. And then there's the ongoing monthly subscription like you'd have with home internet. Now there are multiple plans available. I wouldn't say that any of them are particularly good value if you compare it to a home internet plan. So one of the plans is a stationary plan if you're just using Starlink at home. And then there's a plan if you're regularly moving location like we are in the van. And for some reason, that is 25% more than the fixed plan. I'm not sure why. It's the same hardware. In fact, the dish we have was set up for home and it was just a plan change. So it's definitely the same hardware. I'm not sure why it's so much more expensive. And yeah, it's not even cheap to begin with. So the hardware cost ranges significantly. I've seen it from as low as 199 Australian dollars up to $1,000, and varying prices in between depending what deal is running. And I think that's going to probably change all the time. And then the monthly subscription fee, I think at the moment we're paying around $174 Australian, which is pretty steep. For reference, before we left on this trip in the van, we were paying around $70 for home internet with a pretty decent speed and unlimited data. I think at the moment the fixed plan for just one location is about $139 a month. So again, that's also pretty expensive. So keep in mind the plans are going to change in price depending on where you are in the world and also when you're watching this. But I guess at the end of the day, you're paying a premium price for a premium service that no one else is able to offer at the moment. As I mentioned previously, we did start off with a mobile phone booster, but it's been pretty ineffective. And to be honest, I wish we'd just never got that and had just gotten Starlink from the beginning for the service that it offers.
The last thing I want to talk about was space, which is not something that I thought about until we got the hardware. So this dish, as you can see, is actually quite large. And when you live in a van, space is at a premium. It's also quite an awkward shape to store. It does come apart. It does come apart. I think it comes apart. Now it does come apart, but you're still left with these two awkward shapes to try and store. Bit of a tip, there is a stow function in the app, which makes the dish fold up for a little bit better storage, but it's still not the best. We were lucky that we had this space here, which fits the dish perfectly. But yeah, space is definitely something to keep in mind, particularly if you have a smaller van or smaller vehicle. It is a bit bulky. Another thing that we found is the router seems to be designed to sit on top of a cupboard, and it doesn't have those normal mounting points for wall mounting like you'd have with a typical router. which does seem odd for a product that is marketed towards people living on the road. There are products available, like third-party products, where you can fit this into the base and then mount it to a wall. We've just secured it here with this strap, bit of a strap over the top protecting it. That hasn't moved at all. That's just the solution we had for mounting it while we're on the road, and it seems to be working.
Thanks for watching. I hope this answers some of your questions around Starlink if you're looking to get it for yourself.